Hey everyone, it's Bill here again, and today we're going back to basics with another of my piano questions answered tutorials for you. This one has been prompted by a really good question that has come in from Andreas, who asks, how do I find the chords of all the keys available? I've seen so many videos, but I haven't found one that explains that. Now on the face of it, that seems like a really simple question, but answering it is going to take us into some really useful basic music theory. So the first thing we need to do is pin down exactly what Andreas means. How do we find the chords of all the keys available? First of all, let's make sure we understand what we really mean when we talk about key. Key is a really fundamental concept in music, but actually it's pretty hard to define, and the best way is with an example. Let's say that we have a song in the key of C major. What does that mean? Well, in simple terms, it means our song is going to have a generally major sound, bright and happy if you like, in very broad terms, rather than a generally minor sound, which we might think of as dark and perhaps sad. Okay? Now the final note of our C major song's melody line will almost certainly be C, one of the C's on the piano keyboard, okay? Although C won't necessarily be the first note of its melody line. Thinking that a song's key is set by its first note is a trap beginners often fall into, okay? So, that is not necessarily true. At a deeper level, our song in C major will be mostly, and perhaps entirely, built up of notes taken from the C major scale. Now, many songs in C major will also use notes from outside the C major scale, but even if they do, they're still mostly going to be built around those 7 unique notes of the C major scale: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C at the top of the scale. Also, and here's where we get to the heart of our question, the chords that underlie the melody of our song in C major are going to be mostly, and in many cases entirely, taken from a list of 7 chords that we can, if you like, grow out of that C major scale. We do that by taking this simple chord shape, a root position triad, and just running it up the scale, using the scale notes and no others to build the chords. So that gives us C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and then back to C at the top of the scale. And of course we could just keep running that up the piano because obviously the pattern of octaves repeats. So when Andreas talks about the chords of a key, this is what he means, the chords that grow naturally out of a key scale. As you may know, in the context of a major key at least, we often call these the diatonic chords. And those are the chords that are mostly, maybe not entirely, but mostly going to be the chords that we find in our C major song. Okay, so what are the benefits of being able to find the chords of a key, and how do we go about finding them? To my mind, there are 3 big benefits, and they all swing around one really important fact. As well as giving the chords of a key names like C, D minor, E minor, F, G, and so on, we can also give them numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1 at the top of the scale. We tend to write those numbers, by the way, as Roman numerals, with capital numerals for major chords and lowercase numerals for minor and diminished chords. Now, a chord's name is a chord's name, whatever key it's in, and apart from the fact that some chords have 2 names, so for example that chord you could think of either as A flat major or G sharp major, apart from that, those chord names are fixed. But the numbers we give to chords are relative to their key. So in C major, the 1, 4 and 5 chords are C, F and G. They're the chords built on the 1st, 4th and 5th notes of the C major scale. 1, 4, 5. But if we move to the key of F major, there's the scale of F major with that black note, B flat in there, then, and here are the chords built on that scale. Okay, our 1, 4 and 5 chords have changed. Can you see what they might be? Here's 1, the F chord built on the 1st degree of the scale, the 1st note of the scale. There's 4, B flat, built on the 4th note of the scale, and C, built on the 5th note of the scale. So 1, 4 and 5 in the key of F, 1, 4 and 5 in the key of C. So the first benefit of being able to find the chords of a key is if you need to change key. Let's say, for example, that you're in the key of F major. You have a song in F major, but you're finding the top note, that high F, too hard to sing. So you want to transpose it, you want to change the key, and you've decided to come down a whole tone, a whole step into the key of E flat. If we don't say major or minor after the name of a key or chord, by the way, it always means it's major. Yeah, you want to come down to the key of E flat, an E flat major. Well, if the song in F uses the chords F, D minor, G minor and C, very common chords, we can see that those are the number 1, 6, 2 and 5 chords in that key. Now, if we can work out what the 1, 6, 2 and 5 chords are in E flat, we've made our job of transposing a lot easier. So here's the scale of E flat and the chords based on it. E flat, F minor, G minor, A flat, B flat, C minor, D diminished and back to E flat. Can you see what the 1, 6, 2 and 5 chords are there? So the 1 chord is pretty easy, E flat. The 6 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is C minor. The 2 chord, F minor, and the 5 chord, B flat. Yeah, as I said, our transposition just got a lot easier because we aren't having to work things out by ear. We're not having to count down each individual chord. We can just say, aha, I need the 1, 6, 2 and 5 chords from the new key. Remember, by the way, that you're not always going to be playing chords in these root position shapes. Okay, sometimes you will, but just as often you'll play them in different inversions, different voicings, using the same notes but just in a different order or with different numbers of notes. We're just using these root position triads to find the basic forms of the chords, the notes they contain. The other 2 benefits of being able to find the chords of a key both flow from that first big one. So benefit number 2, it makes improvisation and songwriting easier. And benefit number 3, if you can work out the chords of a key, it means you can function more easily in a variety of keys. You're not just stuck in C or A minor or G or the other easy keys. Okay, so let's get to the meat of this. How do you work out the chords to any key? Let's start off by looking at the major keys first. Minor keys work a bit differently and I'll deal with them in a few minutes. So let's pick a random note and work out the chords of the major key based on that note. Let's go with B flat. So the first thing we have to do is work out how to find the scale of B flat major. How do we do that? Well, actually that's pretty easy because we can take advantage of the fact that all major scales follow the same pattern on the piano keyboard, specifically the same pattern of tones and semitones, whole steps and half steps if you prefer the US terminology. Just as a reminder, if we say that a note is a semitone or a half step above another, we mean it's the very next note up the piano keyboard, counting both white and black notes. So if we start on the note E and go up 1 semitone, we get to F. Okay, so F is a semitone or a half step above E. It works the other way as well. So if we go to E flat, we would say that from E we've gone down a semitone or a half step, the very next note down the piano keyboard, counting both black and white notes. A whole step, a whole tone is just 2 half steps, 2 semitones. So if we start on C and go up a semitone, a half step, we get to C sharp or D flat. If we go up a whole tone, we get to D. Okay. By the way, we use the terms whole tone and tone interchangeably as we do whole step and step. This terminology gets incredibly confusing because over here in the UK we talk about tones and semitones, and over in the States and in lots of other parts of the world it's steps and half steps, and on the internet you come across both often mixed up together, which is why I'm being very careful to use both there. Now, as I said, the scales of all major keys follow the same pattern of tones and semitones, of steps and half steps. Let's look at it in C to begin with. There's the scale of C major again. And from C, the pattern goes upwards like this. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. or if you want to use the US terminology, from C it goes step, step, half step, 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 half step. So ideally what you need to do is remember that sequence. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. If you learn it off by heart, you'll find that really useful. So now let's take that pattern and use it to build the scale of B flat major. Here we go, from B flat we're going to go tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, or step, step, half step, 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 half step, and that gives us the notes B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G and A, and back to B flat at the top again. One thing that is really useful and important is to learn the fingerings for scales, okay? Because if you're going to get good at playing the piano, then it's really helpful to practice your scales, but that's kind of outside the remit of this tutorial, okay? But just as a side note, don't always play your scales just with one finger, yeah? That's a good way to work them out, but do learn the fingerings for different scales. By the way, I should say, obviously, that the other way you can work out the scales of keys and the chords of keys if you don't know them is just to look them up. You know, Google will soon tell you. But I think it's really useful to spend some time working them out for yourself, okay? You'll internalize the knowledge much better that way, and it'll end up becoming much more kind of instinctive, which is what you're aiming for. Okay, so now we know the scale of the key of B flat major, how do we work out the chords of the key from that scale? Well, as we saw with C major, all we have to do is to take this triad shape and run it up the scale. But here's the important thing, we're not just going to use the white notes to build the chords, we're going to make sure that we only use the notes of the scale. And as we've just seen, the scale of B flat major has two black notes. We've got B flat, obviously enough, but also E flat. So we have to take account of those as we run our triad shape up the scale. Let's try it and see what happens. We get B flat to start with, then C minor, because we've got that E flat in the middle of the triad, then D minor, then E flat major, which uses both of the black notes in the scale, then F, then G minor, then A diminished, okay, again we've got the E flat in there, and then back to B flat at the top of the scale. To make things easier here, there's actually another pattern you can learn. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. That pattern of chords holds good for all of the major scales, okay? So there's our B flat major scale, and it goes major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, back to major. If we go into C major again, it does the same. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and back to major. Okay, so that's how to find the chords of a major key, but what about a minor key? The really good news is that the techniques you use are exactly the same, it's just that the patterns you need to learn are slightly different. There's also a little complication because we have to deal with two different types of minor scale, and you need to know how to find the chords for both, because frequently both of the minor scales and their chords will crop up in the same song. The good news is they're really similar to each other. So first of all, we have to know about the natural minor scale. That's A natural minor. Now that's a slightly confusing use of the word natural, because in this context it's not the same meaning as natural as in not sharp or flat. So that's A flat, that's A sharp, that's A natural. It's nothing to do with that. It's all about the quote-unquote natural structure of that minor scale. Okay, it's the exact mirror of the relative major scale. C major uses exactly the same notes, but let's not go into that here. So that we have the natural minor scale, A natural minor, and we also have the harmonic minor scale, which is exactly the same, except the seventh note of the scale, the seventh degree of the scale, is raised, is sharpened by one semitone. Okay, so natural minor, harmonic minor. If you've ever had piano lessons, you might have heard of things like the melodic minor. Okay, don't worry too much about that for now. We need to focus on the natural and the harmonic minor scales. Let's look at the natural minor scale and its chords first, and I'll stick to using A natural minor because it's really simple. It's just the white notes between any two A's on the piano keyboard. And the pattern of tones and semitones we have in the natural minor scale is, starting on A, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone. or if you like the US terminology, starting on A we go up step, half step, 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 half step, step, step. Yeah, and exactly as in the major, we could take that pattern of tones and semitones, steps and half steps, and start on any key of the piano keyboard to build a natural minor scale off that key. So let's build some chords from the A natural minor scale using exactly the same technique as we did last time, taking a triad shape and running it up the scale, and bearing in mind that we're only using the notes of the scale we've just played. We get A minor, B diminished, C, C major, D minor, E minor, F, G. Now if you look carefully at those chords, you'll see that they're exactly the same as the chords of C major, just in a different order. And that's exactly what you'd expect, because the A natural minor scale is exactly the same as the C major scale. It just starts and ends on a different note. Because they share the same basic scale and chords, we say that C and A minor are relative keys. Okay, so C is the relative major of A minor and A minor is the relative minor of C major. So anyway, as I said, the same principle holds as for the major. You can take that pattern of tones and semitones to create a natural minor scale and build chords from it. Just as with the major scale, you can also number the chords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They'll always follow a regular pattern, okay? In this case, minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. So let me run that through for you again. Minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. So what about the harmonic minor scale? Well, it's exactly the same as the natural minor except for one note. The 7th note of the harmonic minor scale, the 7th degree of that scale, is a semitone higher, a semitone sharper we might say, than in the natural minor. Let's kind of make that concrete on the piano keyboard. There's our A natural minor scale, and here's our A harmonic minor. Can you see how we've sharpened that 7th? So instead of a G, we have a G sharp. Let's look at the pattern of tones and semitones we have there. From A, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, exactly as in the natural minor scale. But then we have this big jump, a tone and a half up to the sharpened 7th, to G sharp, and then a semitone up to the A. Any kid who's ever had piano lessons will tell you about the agony of learning harmonic minor scales for the first time, because they all have this big jump near the end and they're often very awkward to get your fingers around. Okay, so natural minor, harmonic minor. Let's try and build some chords off that harmonic minor scale. Don't worry too much about memorizing the pattern of chords from the harmonic minor, because it's very, very unusual to find a song that exclusively uses harmonic minor chords. Sometimes, but quite unusual. Okay, but we're going to come across an important point as we go through these chords though, so stick with me. We have on the number 1 note on the tonic, A minor. Then we have on the 2nd note of the scale, B diminished. So far we're exactly the same as the natural minor chords. But then on the 3rd degree of the scale, we have C augmented, okay, because that G sharp is now making its presence felt. Then on the 4th degree of the scale, D minor. And then on the 5th degree of the scale, and this is the really important one, the really useful one, as we'll see, E major. Again, that sharpened 7th is cropping up. Then on the 6th degree of the scale, F. On the 7th degree, we hit the G sharp again for G sharp diminished, and then we're back to A minor at the top of the scale. Here's the important thing. Most songs in minor keys use the natural minor scale and its chords most of the time, but sometimes they dip into the harmonic minor. And 90% of the time, the reason for doing that is to borrow that major chord based on the 5th degree of the harmonic minor scale. Okay, now that's a very handy chord in the minor because it makes a good, strong, dominant chord to take us back to the number 1 chord, the so-called tonic. Okay, 5, 1. Now you might know about dominant tonic 5-1 resolution, the so-called perfect cadence. Okay, the major chord based on the 5th note of the scale is a lot more effective in that role than the regular 5 chord of the natural minor, which would be E minor. Now as you can hear, E minor to A, yeah, it kind of takes us back home to A minor, but it's nowhere near as strong as E major to A minor, and that's because of the presence of that G sharp, the leading tone, a semitone below the tonic, which really wants to drag us up back to the tonic. Resolutions, cadences, all that stuff are a whole other story though, and I don't want to get bogged down in them here because we don't have time. You can find out about that stuff in lots of my other tutorials. What I want you to take away from this tutorial is just how useful it is to be able to find the chords of a key, the diatonic chords of a key if you like. Anyway, it's a really useful thing to be able to do and not that hard if you learn to figure out the patterns. And as usual, just make sure you familiarise yourself also with the sounds of these chords and the sounds of these scales. So make sure you can hear the difference between a natural minor and a harmonic minor scale, okay? As I often say, never rely purely on theoretical knowledge for this stuff. You need to use your ears to check things as well. So listen as well as you know, working things out theoretically. So thank you very much, Andreas, for asking that question. It was a really good one and it's allowed me to go over some really fundamental ideas in music theory. Hopefully it was particularly useful for those of you who are starting out with music theory, but also I hope it was useful for those of you who maybe just needed a little bit of a refresher. If you have a question that you would like to ask me yourself, just stick it in the comment thread underneath this video or underneath any of my videos. I always try to answer questions in the comments. Sometimes if I get a really good one or one that a lot of people are asking, I will make a piano questions answered tutorial in response to it. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Please do subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Check me out on social media, and also please check out my books, especially How to Really Play the Piano, the Stuff Your Teacher Never Taught You, which if you can read it, just a little bit of sheet music will really help you learning about things like chords and the basics of theory, especially for improvisation and such like. Yeah. Also please check out my Patreon crowdfunder, patreon.com/Bill Hilton. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Kind of quite a bit to get your teeth into there, but as I say, I hope it was useful. I'll see you next time.